Hi there, and welcome to Season 3 of the Humans and AI podcast. In this podcast, we dive into the real-life stories of the top leaders and entrepreneurs within the artificial intelligence, high-performance computing and data center space. These people truly are at the top of their game. We've got honest and authentic conversations with our guests. We're going to chat about their career journeys, the highs and the lows, and even the lessons they've learned from their mistakes, and the victories they've celebrated along the way. It's all about sharing their experience and knowledge. We talk about the company they're currently in and how they see the future in the space. So if you're looking for practical advice from people who have walked the same path, or just a little inspiration, you're in the right place. We're going to be releasing new episodes on Thursday at 12, so make sure you stay tuned. Hey Seth, how you doing? Great to have you on the show.
Good, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, look, for the benefit of the guests and our audience, the people who are listening, you able to just give you an introduction, who you are, where you're working, the role you're in, and just a little bit about the business.
Yeah, so my name is Seth Dempsey, located out of the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm the co-CEO of a neocloud called Corvex. We're working to bring GPU solutions to people who are beginning to or are already sort of down the road of integrating AI into their businesses and software stacks.
Fantastic. Well, look, obviously we interview a lot of people on the Humans and AI podcast. I think you've probably got one of the most exciting sort of backgrounds from the chat that we had previously. So if we take it back to the beginning, obviously back in the 90s, I think we're similar age. You started out at NASA, I think.
I did. I started out in the 90s in a spot called the NASA Advanced Computational Concepts Laboratory. And we were sitting in a room that had tons of supercomputers, Crays and large silicon graphics units. And then, our project was we had a bunch of commodity hardware that showed up. And the goal was, hey, how do you break these problems up to run on commodity hardware rather than running on these supercomputers? And that was really interesting, and I had an interest sort of academically in distributed computation, and that really sort of set me on my path for my career.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, what a great place to work, and certainly, like you say, to get started. So obviously you did a stint at NASA, and then I think you moved on straight into a little company called, I think it was Microsoft, was it, I believe?
Yeah. I moved out to Seattle, Washington, to work at Microsoft. I had the sort of the good luck of being on the team that was building something that was sort of secret at the time, and now it's known as .NET, sort of the programming platform that underpins Azure and a whole bunch of other Microsoft technologies. So I was on the team building what's called the CLR, or the Common Language Runtime, and we were building the execution engine and the instruction set and the JITs and the garbage collectors and the class libraries that really everything got built on top of, and obviously it evolved a lot over time. But again, sort of sticking to that, like, let's go build languages, runtimes, compilers. It was very interesting, and it was distributed. It was sort of an outgrowth, actually, in the old days of you're really old. You remember Microsoft Com and BCom. This was it was actually called Com Plus 2.0 back in the day. It was really a distributed, object broker system.
Oh, right. And what was your role over there then? So were you in a sort of quite a technical role, or I think you were project management as well at some point?
Yeah, I actually tend to jump back and forth between sort of like product and technology roles. So, while I was doing .NET, at one point I was at Microsoft, they called product managers program managers. We were doing the design of class libraries and the instruction set, and we standardized .NET in ECMA, European Computer Manufacturers Association. So I was one of the people who wrote that spec and drove the standardization. At the same time, I moved over a little later to something called the .NET Compact Framework, where we were rewriting .NET to work on small devices, embedded devices. But I was a developer and a development manager for that, actually sort of writing code and managing teams of developers. So my interest and sort of experience fits really nicely between sort of those two types of roles.
And I mean, that must give you a huge advantage, in life today, like, from project management, technical engineering to technical leadership. I don't think many people really sort of work across the full sort of spectrum within technology. Do you think that's given you a bit of an advantage?
Well, yeah, I think it has, but I will say it was intentional, right? So it was funny, like in my career, I always sort of seek out people who I think are interesting or in interesting positions or have, interesting, it's not about ownership so much as what is the impact that they're driving and figure out how they got there. And it dawned on me when I was pretty young early in my career that being a multidisciplinary manager was a way to have broad impact, right? And then I would start to ask people, how do you do multidisciplinary management? And it was funny. I had progressed quite well in my program management, product management career at Microsoft, and my guy who was my mentor said to me, he's like, I'm going to give you an opportunity to drop 2 levels and be a developer again. And I was like, why would I want to do that? He's like, well, I thought you wanted to be a multidisciplinary manager. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean that it's a straight line. Because you take the reset, you take the hit. No one's going to think you're going to be a dev manager if you haven't written production level code for multiple years. Go do the job and grow into it. And then you're going to have, the authentic skill set and, ability to have empathy with these roles and connect them in a way that other people who haven't done both of these roles really from the bottoms up have. And so I've done that multiple times in marketing, in business, where I've taken that sort of, beginner's lens and mindset into these jobs, and then started to build that connective tissue with the other skill set that I had. But it was quite intentional, and it was because I was looking at people who were accomplishing interesting things and interesting scale and saw those types of backgrounds. And it was like, how do I put myself in a position to have the opportunity to do these types of things?
Fantastic. I mean, I can see that. Yeah. I mean, having the empathy is huge when leading people, right? And understanding the situation they're in and what they're doing, the challenging they're facing. It's the way to have the best amount of credibility, isn't it, as a leader, to sort of help drive them forward.
Yeah, no, I think it also helps you, I think, more effectively, lead people, because you've, at some point walked a mile, in their shoes. What I tell people nowadays is nobody would allow me to commit to our production branch anymore. And I get that, but I still enjoy writing code at night and on the weekends and experimenting with new things. And, but I think the real revelation to me was that the journey wasn't linear, right? It wasn't a staircase that went up. Like there were places to go across and places to go sideways and places to go down with good reason. And so, not having this, sort of like, up view of the world, I think it enables you to take, some interesting paths and create some, interesting interdisciplinary, capabilities that do wind up putting you in a, more unique position.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, and it's not one that most people naturally think of, to be fair. But like you say, it's given you so much more experience. And it's surprising you'd even consider moving from Microsoft back then, with all that variety in your roles that you were doing. You took obviously a leap from Microsoft to another hyperscaler. What sort of enticed you away?
Yeah, so it's super funny. So I did wind up at Google as an early employee in the Seattle office. And, after I did .NET, I was actually the group program manager for search. We were building what is now Bing. Microsoft had classically partnered with another company to do algorithmic search for MSN. And I was the GPM on the team building, at the time it was called MSN Search, now it's called Bing. A number of the folks from the .NET team had moved over there. And so it was a very interesting opportunity to do something new and scaled. But I had a guy who used to be my, like an intern of mine. And he went back to school and he wound up at this company called Google. And he called me up. He's like, you need to come here now. Right. But it was like 3 years before I wound up going to Google. Right. Because I was seeing such interesting growth and opportunity and transitions and leadership and, roles in Microsoft. They do such a, like, to give them credit, like they do such a great job of intentionally, like, enabling you to create interesting multidisciplinary career paths. Like you have to do the work and drive, but it's there for you. But ultimately, what was going on at Google, sounded very interesting to me. And I did take the jump. Certainly, don't regret it. It's interesting. Microsoft, works in one methodology. Google works in a different methodology. Mm-hmm. Both of them are very engineering-centric, engineering-focused companies with highly technical leaders, which is, very different from a lot of companies, in the world. But the way that technology leadership worked and how it manifested itself in the culture of the company, in the attributes of employees that were considered successful. At the time, I was telling people, like, I'm like having to rewire my brain to work in this system, and it was not just culturally different, but the way that Google and Larry Page in particular, to me, thought about scale was different than the way Microsoft thought about scale. And that is from not just a technical perspective, but also from like a product perspective, product positioning perspective, and thinking about, the marginal cost of supporting additional users, and how do we architect technology and partnerships and deals to effectively assume we're going to give everything away to the whole world. It was a very different mindset, and it really stretched me, and I enjoyed it.
I can imagine the two cultures, and I suppose just even philosophies towards technology could be very different from Microsoft and Google. Microsoft with all that tenure and all that history, Google being a very innovative new kid on the block in comparison back then. Yeah. I can imagine it must have been very exciting and refreshing as well.
It is, but I will say there are a lot of things that were in common that I've seen across great organizations, which is just, number one, great engineering talent. Number two, great engineering discipline. Yeah. Number three, great engineering communications, right? How do we make others better is a core part of all of those cultures. And it's something that we try to bring, to Corvex today, right? We can hire people to do their job, but like, that's just wholly uninteresting, right? Mm-hmm. If you're not interested in making others better and getting that multiplier effect, based on who you are and how you work, how are you going to up-level or grow an organization rapidly if you think your job is to do your job? That's not your job. That's like the minimum, right? And that's nobody who works here or who worked at Google or Microsoft was happy with that. It was really about how do we enable others to be successful, and whether those others are our customers or our coworkers, our partners. Like, it was about that fan out, and fundamentally, a lot of us who are in software engineering. One of the reasons that we're in it is because there's this, if you think about the classic production process of a designer on a car or somebody on an assembly line, like there's this real sort of physical manifestation of what you do in this one-to-one correspondence. But in software, like, you can ship something and it can be up 2 billion computers. Mm-hmm. And it's the same code that you would have shipped basically if it was on one. Right? Yeah. Now, that changed with the cloud, the way that the architectures and big data and things like that work. But, back in the days of shrink-wrapped software, the marginal cost of an additional unit was effectively zero. And, whether you wrote the video game to be on one computer or 100 million, it was the same game. And that multiplier effect was intriguing as you think about, why you do what you do, right? And the impact that you can have as a person. There are great, I have a lot of folks in my family who are doctors, and they thrive on that one-on-one attention and unique capability that they can provide to help make someone's life better. And in software, we have a different one-to-many aspect to it that really appeals to some people, really appeals to me. Now, it does take us away from our customers. It does take us further away from our end users, which is why, culturally, if you look at Microsoft, if you look at, Google, if you look at, other places that I've worked and, companies that I've founded, building that empathy, building that customer empathy, that real direct connection is critical. At Microsoft, one time, I remember I got to a certain level and my reward was having to sit in the customer call center. And I was like, this isn't a reward as a young person. Like, wait a second. I came away from that week in that customer call center with a completely different attitude on end users and their problems, and how an ounce of documentation, it's not just about call avoidance in the call center, right? Like, that might be the business KPI, but really it's about customer happiness, right? Like, how do we help people succeed without us? How do we, do things, better? And hearing the frustration, at the earlier part of the week, I was in general tech support. In the second half, I was doing my product. But, when you're on the phone with someone for 45 minutes and then they're like, check the power cord, right? Okay, that was interesting, right? So was there a process breakdown? Should there have been a green light that they asked you to check first, right? Like, this is stuff that when we think about, moving forward in lights out data centers and scaled things, like we have to think really hard about, solving problems at scale and effectively, when I think about Google, one of the things that Google brought to my mentality was build for failure. Build assuming things are going to break in inconvenient ways at inconvenient times. And do you want to get the page or not? Are you going to build a self-healing resilience system, that can take care of itself, or are you going to be the hero, right? That's not scalable, right? Being the 3 a.m. hero. That happens.
No, absolutely.
There are physical aspects of operation that just exist. But how do you pave over it in such a way that it can be taken care of the next day with no impact to customers, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned about, obviously, you try to implement some of the things you've learned at Microsoft and at Corvex, at Google into Corvex, right? And I think that's the thing. There's all these experiences that we have throughout our careers, that they come to a point and not necessarily the culmination is Corvex, because who knows what the future brings, but obviously you bring that in, and I imagine Corvex is probably a melting pot of all your past experiences to create something new, right? And looks and feels a bit different, but actually the DNA is part of all that experience that you've got there.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, Nick. I mean, it's I've been to other big companies. I took a very interesting tack after Google and went to a company that seems illogical to most people. Why would you go to AOL, right? Well, we all know about imposter syndrome, right? Well, was I successful because I was at Microsoft or Google and because of their position, or was I successful because I'm actually good at working in a disadvantaged starting position with resource constraints? And there was a really interesting rebuilding challenge at AOL to rebuild. At Google, one of the things I did was work on the non-search ad business. And there was a big non-search ad business. Executive from Google went to go spin AOL out of Time Warner, and said, "Hey, you should maybe come take a look at this with me." And it was a different challenge because we were behind. We didn't have the same culture of engineering, though it was a good culture of engineering was different. Right, a lot of acquisitions that weren't integrated, different financial pressures, different headwinds, and how do you operate successfully? What lessons transfer in? What new lessons do you need to learn? I've certainly had to let people go before in my career as a manager, but have I ever had to do mass layoffs and own that? And still keep the rest of the team motivated and keep us on track? These were very difficult, hard, important things to learn. And you'd think 15 plus years into your career or more at that point in time that the learning goes down, like the marginal amount of learning that you get goes down. And no, it doesn't. Not if you're putting yourselves in interesting positions that are stretching yourself. And to be quite honest, that's what's so fun about this. That's what's been fun about the other startups that I've founded and exited and Corvex is we're putting ourselves in positions where we can use the capabilities we have, apply a unique market view, sort of give something to clients that is, hopefully unique and differentiated and value creating and easy to use and, lovable and all of these things. Like we want our products to be hard to unuse, right? Like that's like the best, compliment you can get is like, oh man, I can't unuse your product. But that's it is the amalgamation of all those experiences and all the failures that have come along the way.
And so obviously your CTO at AOL. It's funny. AOL is it wasn't that huge in the UK. So back sort of similar times, and I remember must be 2003, and my ex-father-in-law came over to the UK, and my ex was American, so she was living over here. We had children, and he was talking about AOL, and because we used it as that was part of. I think my ex had that as the internet. And I'd never heard of it. It was all really, and I was like, "What, you have it in America as well?" And didn't actually realise it was America Online. Nobody really knew it here in the UK. It was completely new, and it just cast my mind back to that. But I mean, obviously, you're doing a CTO role there, and you had all these different experiences, like mass layoffs. I mean, that's a horrible thing to do. You have to show compassion, and like you say, motivating the people that are still there, and obviously being compassionate to those that are going is, again, it's a huge experience. Not all negative experiences are bad experiences. I think it makes you something else.
Yeah, but you learn that, like, I mean, you're not good at protecting your people, right? Like sometimes you're like, oh, you shouldn't ever have to do it. The reality is that, like, you need to put people in positions where they can succeed, and sometimes the place that they can succeed best is somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really the truth. Sometimes, like the first time I ever had to part ways with someone over performance problems, like way back, in my Microsoft days, and I was the manager. It was interesting because I was super nervous about it. The person was pretty senior; they'd been at Microsoft a long time and had performance reviews that were whatever, but. It was funny, like the guy who was my mentor he's like, I'm waiting to see what you do here. And I said, why? He's like, well, you have your doubts about this person. I'm like, yes. He's like, well, do you think the whole rest of the team thinks he's pulling his weight? Like, they want to know if you're just going to be another person that lets him pass for 3 years while they pick up the slack or not, And so it was less about him and more about like the rest of the team. And it was funny. I was talking to somebody recently who ran a food store, and they laid somebody off, and they were very heartbroken about it. And their whole staff came to them afterwards and said, "I can't believe you finally did it. Thank you." Right? It was a morale booster, right?
Yeah.
Like what you see, other people see too, right? And quite frankly, it put that other person in a better position to be in a job that plays to their strengths, or puts them in a position where they're more likely to, be successful. And it's almost a disservice to the individual to have allowed it to fester that long, right? Same thing goes with mass layoffs. That's more of a corporate or some other shifting problems. But I've seen people like put them off and put them off and put them off, and what that does is it means you have to lay off more people, because you still have to hit the same number at the end of the year. So what you did was you actually, you sacrificed more people to keep the larger team on longer. And I know that people say ripping the Band-Aid off hurts, but like, it's really the more compassionate thing to do, because it sets the business up for more sort of long-term steady state than having to be in a position where you're laying off now and laying off now and laying off now. Then everybody gets in this position where they're like, when's the next one? Right? And then all of your good people who didn't get laid off just know it's a matter of time before the next one and the next one and the next one. They're looking for other jobs. You've lost the people who are, really the folks who make you special, right? Everyone has a contribution, but we all know that there's this sort of, I don't know if it's an 80-20 rule or, whatever it is. Like, there are some people who are the people who are great at making others better, and we can't afford to lose them. And we need to make sure that they believe that we're doing the best we can to set them up for long-term success.
It's huge. I mean, keeping people in the business for, it's not nice letting people go. It's often the best thing to do, right? And like you say, you get people then go, I'm so glad you did that. And it doesn't necessarily mean, good people can become toxic if they're in the wrong role, if they're in the wrong situation, and it creates toxic tendencies across the rest of the business. And it's not always, doesn't even have to be toxic. It just can be some form of light negativity. But when you do make that change, you see the positivity really come up in the business. People get, people that may be a little bit lazy, stop being lazy, do more, go experiment. Other people that actually are very happy because they're no longer feeling like they're carrying the other member of staff. It has so many positive impacts. It's huge.
I'll give you a counterpoint to this, which is, I think, pretty interesting too. I am a huge believer in ultra clear communications with employees and doing documented performance improvement plans. The number of employees that I've had who have gone through a PIP process and come out the other end as different people, like on a long term, not just for like 3 months. These are all tough because they're sensitive, like people situations. But I'm thinking of one human being who I know everybody wanted me to have part ways with the company, and I remember somebody coming to me a year later. They're like, what did you do to turn him around? And I was like, honestly, I'm the reason he wasn't successful, because I wasn't putting enough time as a manager. I didn't realize his specific needs as an employee and what he needed that were different, because not all employees are the same. And I said, I should have been paying attention to this sooner. It was a joint failure. But we're always willing to invest in people, right? To figure it out, because we both benefit from the diagnostic. So doing the hard work, there's no substitute.
And that's it. A performance improvement plan, that should be to improve the person. So many times it's used to exit somebody and not actually to make a better employee. And I think it's a real horrible situation when the leader's going into a pit because they're trying to get them out. And that becomes a horrible environment as well.
It does, and actually, what I've turned to, I mean, it's over the past over 10 years, is there's a tool called documented discussion that a lot of people use during performance improvement plans. I actually use documented discussion as the document that my direct reports use for our weekly one-on-ones.
Really?
Flipping to a PIP literally keeps you on the same document. But what it is about is about aligning expectations and priorities and minimizing misunderstanding. And it turns out it's worth the time. And that was another interesting thing when I was choosing career paths. I could have just as easily chosen an IC career path because, at least in development fields, you could be a principal engineer, you could be a staff engineer, you could be a distinguished engineer, you could be chief software architect. There are great IC paths, and that wasn't always the case in engineering. And you used to find a lot of engineers would be in management positions just because that was where you got promoted to. It was always instilled into me that engineering management is a choice. It is a discipline. You don't know it. You're not good at it. You need to get educated. You need to practice. You really need to realize that you're going to come up the curve as a manager. To Microsoft's credit, they had a first times managers class. Microsoft had a managing managers class as you expanded your span of control. And they would use their longevity and processes and practices and many millions of dollars in HR to give people interest in tools to use. I actually wound up going to business school to learn more about that because I was just so intrigued in both that and, quite frankly, the finance side of the business. Because whenever someone says no because of finance, like, I want to be able to re-engineer things so that it's a yes or that it's a partial yes. And so again, when we think about cross-disciplinary, capabilities, I had an acquisition I wanted to do at one of these companies and I couldn't get it through the board and the corp dev. And it was really because I didn't know how to speak product and engineering to corp dev and boards of directors. And that company actually sent me to business school and, helped build the translator for me, which was another sort of useful tool for the bag, because we went back and actually did that exact acquisition 2 years later at a much higher price. And it was my failure that it wasn't done earlier or faster. And owning that and working on those skill sets it's just been such a pleasure. Continuous learning is really what gets us going.
And taking it back just a little bit there, because obviously you finished at AOL. You worked in these amazing organisations, huge organisations in great roles, variety of roles. So you created this rounded experience. Obviously, and you've been very successful in that. So what gave you that sort of desire, that hunger to go and become an entrepreneur? Because obviously from then on, you've done quite a few different things, and you've obviously sold businesses. So you've been very successful in it. What made you go down that route?
It's really funny. I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Even before when I was in grade school, my father was an entrepreneur. His father was an entrepreneur.
Okay, it's in the family.
It's in the family, and there's a couple other people like this that I know, but my father's in the rare position of being, he can say, the only check I've ever cashed are checks I've written to myself. Right? Like, he literally never worked for anybody other than himself.
Cool.
Which is, that's just mind-blowing to me. But when I was getting out of college, thinking about what to do, I knew I didn't know, right? And there are so many successful entrepreneurs that don't even graduate college and know that they don't know and make it happen. But for me, I saw this really interesting opportunity to learn. And I was having the discussion with my father a couple of years into Microsoft. He's like, man, you should be paying them rather than them paying you, because you're learning the things that you're intentionally there to learn. Could I have done entrepreneurial things now? Yeah, but you know what? Then I was addicted to the opportunity and the scale and the variety of learning, and it was a I'd say conscious trade off. So going into entrepreneurial endeavors, I did do some of it before AOL. I was able to help start a company and be involved in as advisor, really come up with the idea and put the team together. And that company wound up to be a successful, private equity SaaS exit. And then, after AOL, I had, I was really in a position where I had a number of things that I wanted to do. I'd say, the additional thing that I had was the ability to know my customer set and be able to effectively pre-sell the product before we even invested in it. Right? It brought down the risk significantly because we already had, effectively a backlog. Due to the understanding of the problem space, the relationships with the potential clients, and that was interesting. It also enabled us to, finance and capitalize differently because we had a committed backlog against this, but it was a product company, not a consulting company, and go off and do some things in the MarTech and identity spaces, in the cybersecurity space, and now in the sort of AI space.
That's quite fascinating, isn't it? Because you've worked in different. Obviously it's all within technology, but you successfully founded, and exited some businesses, like say MarTech, identity, and now within the Neo Cloud. Normally people stay in it. People go into cybersecurity and then they just make a different iteration of the previous business.
I think if you look below the surface, everything I've done has been exactly the same since NASA. Everything is scaled, distributed computation and machine learning, like almost everything. The cybersecurity business had to process 40 trillion transactions a month. It was a scale business. It used real-time machine learning to analyze traffic patterns, right? The MarTech business was taking in tens of billions of data points a day, and it was doing identity resolution in real time using a combination of heuristic and artificial intelligence. When I was at Google, I built something called Ad Planner. It was a gradient descent in 2008 that was in production, right? So it really is about how do we work with data at scale using intelligence, and if you've got that as the tool bag, sort of like the veneer and the surfacing of it on the top, a lot of depth needs to go into understanding all of those vertical spaces. But times have changed, right? And this is honestly one of the reasons why we're doing Corvex. It used to be hard to operate at scale. It used to be hard you could get value out of just being able to process 40 trillion transactions, because a lot of people couldn't do that. They didn't understand big data and stream processing and how to do online predictions and things like that. Now we have such great infrastructure that is scalable, right? That allows people who don't necessarily have a distributed computational background to be able to do these things at scale. And I think that is liberating. Right, and what we're trying to do at Corvex is feed into that, right? Whether you call us a Neo Cloud or a research group, I'm not exactly sure what the right name is, but our job is to enable people to use AI effectively, performantly, cost effectively, to build new products and shape the products they already have, in interesting and new direction, because it turns out that at scale, running that infrastructure and then running the software on top of it and keeping it secure is still not easy, right?
So beneath the surface, obviously this has been the space you've always been in, right? So you've got all this expertise, got all this experience. We're seeing a lot of neo clouds popping up all over the shop now. Some really good ones, others smaller scale and what have you. You've had a rocket ship, excuse the pun from the NASA days, but a bit of a rocket ship since 2024. Back end of last year, you started Corvex.
Yeah.
How are you trying to do things a little bit differently? Because obviously you've got huge opinions on this because you've been in it for so long. So how are you sort of taking Corvex to be a little bit different?
I think it all comes down to customers and the use cases, right?
Yeah.
Like different folks need different things, and what is required to be a data center operator who then starts to run GPU machines that will perfectly service some set of customers who know how to use those machines and know how to configure the networking and know how to run the software effectively. But as you think about the sort of the lamination of the stack from the dirt through the tokens, that's sort of what we're looking at. You can play at different places and make certain things easier or certain things more efficiently. And when we think about look, we work with lots of people across a lot of different verticals, but the people who really like working with us are people who are in regulated industries. They're in finance, they're in healthcare, they're in government, they're in, things where our pedigree in running like actual enterprise grade solutions that had to be secure. We were, when I was at AOL Verizon, we were regulated by the FCC. If you're good at dealing with not just the sexy GPUs, but the not as sexy, but perhaps even more important process control mechanisms to make sure that look, I mean, SOC 2 compliance is great. There's a lot of people who have SOC 2 compliance. Mm-hmm. SOC 2 compliance means that you wrote a set of procedures that you're saying you're following, and at some point in time, some auditor looked at it over a performance period and thought you were doing it, right? How do those evolve over time? Are you really doing it every day? Do you have hardened processes that make it effectively impossible to not abide by your compliance requirements? How do you upgrade that for ISO and HIPAA? And when we talk about serving governments, it gets even more interesting when you're talking about different data classification levels and different levels of sort of logical and physical segmentation of these networks. Because we've been enterprise buyers and sold into enterprises, understand the full life cycle of a contract, and working with the CISOs and the compliance teams and the DevOps teams and the AI teams, it's put us in a position where we're working with people who need something that's going to fit in, who knows that the hyperscalers are great for a lot of their workload, but there are other options for other pieces of their workload. Quite frankly, I see neoclouds as phenomenal complements to hyperscalers, and they're rewriting the concept of what being multi-cloud can mean. Right? It used to mean different things, but I think that there are lenses that we use to look at hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, with hyperscalers that are quite frankly slightly different, slightly easier to digest, easier to implement, and still give people the value of a combination of the security and the operations, and let's be honest, the cost advantage that we have over hyperscalers, bringing these capabilities into the market.
And that's the seriously thing. Yes, there is a huge cost advantage, but it's obviously not just the cost. It's, like I say, it's the value, and it's the support that you can offer, and it's that knowledge. You've been there, done it. You've been on that side of the fence, so you kind of understand what it is they're trying to achieve, whether it be the SOC team, the CISO, or whether it be talking to the CTO.
So we actually have had a newer support person join the team, maybe 4 months ago. And we always do ticket retros at the end of every month because we want to get better, right? Yeah. We obviously do RCAs on stuff way faster than that, but you want to zoom out, you want to look at things. And one of the stats we had was like 85% of our tickets, we weren't doing anything wrong. Or there wasn't a question that was like pertinent to our service that we're offering the client, right? Yeah. And the guy was a little frustrated. He's like, why are we fielding so many questions that have literally nothing to do with what we're building a customer for? And I said, that's the best thing in the world. That means that these people trust you so much that they want your opinion to help them solve problems that are meaningful to them. It means you are not a vendor. It means you're a partner, right? And when you build partnerships, right, and it gives you the opportunity to then have conversations beyond the ticket. What are you really trying to do? We're under NDA. Maybe we can help you be more effective in doing it. Maybe it's something Corvex does. Maybe it's something that a partner of ours does. Maybe it's a vendor that we've thought about working with but haven't worked with yet, right? But we know about them and we've talked to them but don't have a business relationship that we can introduce you to help you solve some of your problems. Because let's be honest, everybody is very new at this.
Yep.
right? And especially if you look at non-AI native companies, if you look at traditional companies or enterprises who are having to evolve into this landscape, having partners that they can rely on and trust to help, give them, guidance, as they sort of, have to be the experts, and, they might have just gotten this remit on their plate 3 months ago, right? We were talking to somebody at a large healthcare organization that was, they just got the remit 3 months ago, and they were, you can see that they were like overwhelmed. And, our job for him is going to evolve over time, from helping him be confident that he's got someone who can back him in writing reports and building presentations for his CTO and CIO and CEO about their moves, all the way through actually scaling their operations when it comes time for that, right? So, being able to be there and help people on this journey in a trusted way, like that's our values. That's what gets us up. Like we've been talking about this from the beginning. It is about making others better. And that thread has been, since the beginning of this conversation, it's still going.
And that's it. And that's fascinating, because I've lost count how many times I've spoken to a provider or I've asked them a question. Yeah, that's a loss. Oh, I can't help you, right?
Yeah.
And it's and it is frustrating, because obviously I need answers. But the fact that you've got 85% of your tickets that aren't actually directly related to the service that you're offering, but they're coming to speak to you, and you're willing to help. You're embracing that conversation is refreshing, isn't it, really?
Well, and quite frankly, Nick, another 10% of those tickets are misconfigurations on the system that are being done by the people who are operating them while still coming up the curve, right? And then we get to say, hey, maybe you should be operating this at a different layer. Maybe you don't need to think about this portion of the system because it's automated and you're probably following this to do this. But like, what is your objective? How can we enable you to do more with less, more reliably? And those are the conversations that drive us, right?
So talking about Corvex then and the business you're doing, so obviously you're a neo cloud, so you've got infrastructure for AI, machine learning sort of workloads, working with customers. You're an NVIDIA shop, so let's just talk a little bit more about how you're structuring the business, where you see the business sort of going, really. I appreciate I don't want to necessarily plug the business too much, but obviously it's an exciting startup. So
I would say at a high level, yes, we have those neo cloud aspects. We do have hardware. We do run a cloud. We're very good at multi-tenant. We're very good at virtual single tenant, actual single tenant. Like I said, some financial customers, they have different requirements, and I won't get into how crazy they get, but our job is to be flexible and enable them to be successful, right? On the security side, on the finance side, on the ops and compliance side, and on the actual AI computing side. But we also have effectively like a research lab in here too, right? And a solutions engineering group. So we're working very hard to optimize and tune and secure these systems so that they work better and faster and more secure. Right. So how do we, we're seeing a significant percentage of our business is on what's called confidential compute. Confidential compute allows you to not just have your data sort of encrypted, at rest and in transit over the network, but it allows us to use these trusted execution environments, these enclaves inside of our Intel processors, inside of our H200, B200 class chips that make it such that the operating system and the hypervisor of the cloud provider can't even see into those areas to look at the decrypted data, right? So there are certain, whether it's model builders who don't want their weights getting out, or healthcare companies who have PHI HIPAA requirements, and they need to be able to prove cryptographically that there's no logging in the inference system. How do we, verify this on boot? How do we use the enclaves, use signatures, use key exchanges, to help them actually build that up? And we're based in the DC area, and that's really exciting to me, because we have a lot of people who've been working with this somewhat esoteric stuff that's been around for a while and used in government. But we have folks on our team who have been operating these secure attestation and enclave systems for better part of a decade for the highest sensitivity portions of the U.S. government. And these are the people who are bringing to bear secure solutions for whether it's health systems or medical data processors or AI medical companies. We work with them, to even do things like secure multi-party data training. We will allow them to, help them build a system where they can get data from healthcare providers to train their models on, where the two providers of the data don't want the other people to see their data, and encrypt, actually train on encrypted data in the enclaves from multiple parties at the same time. So did we think about that as a product offering? No, it was a need, it was a necessity for one of our at the time prospects. Now it is an offering that we bring to people because it is a general purpose problem and we have productized it, right? So, getting out there, putting your nose in, like helping people with these opportunities, it helps you determine your product direction with the business overlay, right? What's the market? Is it developing? Are we too early? Does somebody else already have it? You actually obviously have to do that as well. And like you mentioned earlier, that's my co-founder. Couldn't be more different from me. Private equity background, investment banking. Between the two of us, I like to joke that we're one fully formed founder, but it's a great partnership because we do have a decade worth of, HBM, high bandwidth memory between the two of us, and high bandwidth communications. We have our own InfiniBand. We can speak to each other very, very fast and less flapping than normal IB, and get great things done.
And it's really interesting what you're talking about there, about the fact that you created this product offering, because so many founders talk about having to pivot their strategy, and I'm not, that's not really pivoting. That was just the fact that you basically have identified something that clients need, and you're going to bolt that onto your offering. So it's actually having that awareness that actually we don't have to make this a one-off bespoke solution. It's about actually telling this and actually producing it and giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we went into this relationship eyes open. Like, we knew that these were areas that we were intrigued in developing. We believed that there was an underserved market, right? Then we're more of a solutions provider than just a cloud vendor. If you think about Amazon, like, they're not really a cloud. I mean, they have hardware, and people still run EC2 sometimes on bare metal. But Bedrock is what people are using for AI. People are using Lambda, and they're using EKS, and there's different levels of the stack that you go at. And as a solutions provider, like, our job is to make other people successful. And we need to find people with, hard problems that are underserviced, especially in this AI area. And for us, those regulated companies who need those security overlays, whether at training time or inference, with the automated, secure attestation, confidential compute, like, we just think that's a great market because those people have real problems, and they're being held back by the fact that this is hard to do. So if we can be an accelerant to a portion of the ecosystem, that creates value for them. Creates value for their customers, creates value for us. We like deals where everybody benefits.
Absolutely. Now we're going to be finishing up soon. So, but what I want to get back to, and you mentioned your co-founder. So we talked about it. You've opened, kicked off businesses. You flipped them. You sold them. You're serial entrepreneur. We're now at the days of Corvex. Through those experiences of building businesses, I'm sure you made loads of mistakes, and you've also done things where you thought were absolute winners, and you've kept them in as part of your sort of toolkit. What, for the benefit of some of the CEOs and the founders that are out there that listen to us now, and sometimes they're doing their first startup, right? So, what are the kind of must-dos that you do now when you started Corvex? You've got a few things that probably are essentials.
Yeah, I mean, I think having an operating rhythm, right? Like a communications cadence is really important. We as humans are creatures of habit. When we start to build habits, when we start to build routines, it's a good thing. It starts to keep us organized. It's really important, though, in the early days of a company to be flexible and to realize that these routines can and should be mutated by everybody in the company, not just the founders, right? Everybody gets to have a say. And then, the second thing is like, you need to be out talking to customers. You need to be out talking to non-customers. You need to be talking competitors. You need to be talking to potential competitors. Like, you need to build the like the schema, the mental framework, start to understand how the people and the technology and the business relationships all sort of fold together. And because it's your job as the CEO to like figure out what this secret decoder ring for winning in this business is. And there are businesses who never have to talk to their customers who do well. They do exist. They're more often B2C companies, almost never B2B companies. And they would probably benefit from talking to their customers more as well. But getting out there and putting yourself in their shoes, right? What is the moral equivalent of sitting at the support desk that I did while I was at Microsoft? Now, it's being out with my customers, in their facilities, in their meetings, hearing what really troubles them, because you will pick up a nugget that may never come out in a discovery call. What a gross thing to call something, a discovery call. No, this is the beginning of a collaboration. And in order to collaborate, right, there was, was it the documentary on HBO from Jimmy Iovine, guy that did Beats with Dr. Dre? Be present and be helpful, right? This is it. This is what you got to do, you know? And I think he said it more succinctly than I ever could.
But I suppose you can do that before you even register a business, right? You need to be out there and you need to identify the opportunities with customers, partners. Keep that communication going. Yeah,
we've done that. We have a business that we did, and we're able to successfully exit. That it was literally a top down effort. Like we knew what we were doing. We already had the customers lined up. We already had contracts in place, like before we even started the company, right? Like, what I always do it like that is the spark of innovation, like, very powerful. There's the Steve Jobs story where it's like nobody would have asked for an iPod. They would have asked for a CD player that had 1,000 discs or something like that. Like, I believe in that too. For sure. And you have to have your own opinion. But part of forming your opinion, like, you need to understand the ground truth, right? He knew people had 400 CD books in the back of their car. Like, he knew that. You don't know what's in the back car of the health tech startup. You have to get in there. And not getting in there and being truly interested in what they do. Like, you can't fake it. Like, you actually have to care about them and their mission. It enables you to understand, more than you ever could in a discovery call. And when you get enough of those, your pattern recognition kicks in, your instinct for productization and commonality and configuration comes in, your ability to overlay economic and business models on top of it, again, and that's when things really get good. But sometimes it takes a while. It can take years for some folks. And if they've got the right patient capital, maybe it's a pivot, maybe it's not a pivot, maybe the business that they thought about just grew. I have a company I invested in. They were just too early. But because they had enough money and were able to get lean enough to just hang around the hoop, when everybody else realized that they needed what they did and that they'd already been doing it for 2.5 years, it was like up and to the right. Because they jumped the gun, right? They people didn't really get it, but now they got it,
So worth hanging on. Turned out to be success, I'm sure.
It is, but at the same point in time, there's this sunk cost fallacy, right? Doesn't mean you should spend 3 more years of your life if it's never going to happen. But they had conviction, and as a founder, that's what it comes down to: is do you have conviction?
And yeah, I get that entirely. And I think, look, the market is changing so fast. This neo-cloud world that we're in today, 2.5 years ago, we started hearing about ChatGPT, and that sort of helped spiral everything out of control to what it is now. I mean, obviously you're in this space. You've started businesses. You've seen trends. What do you see the future's like for the next 12, 18 months? Do you think it's going to be much different to what it is now, or do you think this is just going to carry on as we are?
I think it's going to be very different. There's a couple of things that are happening. Number one, different classes of machines are coming out. Yeah. Right, and and different types of models are the fundamental different way of operating them, right? Like, disaggregated pre-fill MOE versus a dense model. It's different. Like, it actually can change the economics if you can operate at scale in a different way. If you know what you're doing. I see very credible open source models hitting the market that in vertical areas rival some of the specialists. Kimi K2, Quencoder, is it Claude, Sonnet or Opus? No. But like, look at the price delta, right? So sometimes more AI is as good, if not better, than some better AI, right? Ensemble model, like selection, model chaining, like we're beginning to understand, the price of productionalization, right? Everything from data privacy to, there's, people who have models that scrub PII before it goes into models. And you could say you could do that with regular expressions. And yeah, you can, but you can't necessarily do it from a text-based question that's talking about someone's personal medical history, right? So, classifiers. So as we think about how the use is just going to explode, right? The use is going to explode. It's going to change people's consumption behavior, how they consume, where they consume, and how their consumption choices are made. Yeah. Right. I think that there's this whole like, are we going to rag or fine tune and Laura adapters? Yeah, we're going to do all of it because everyone's going to do the right thing for them. And as long as they have the tooling to experiment and know what's working, and we're starting to get those data-driven mindsets in people beyond the AI native startups. Yes, they have it. But how do we bring, multi-model analysis into an insurance carrier, right? Like, how do we build? I was talking with a person this morning who's trying to convince an ad agency, to use a different model ensemble for some work that they were trying to do, and they just fundamentally weren't able to get what he was talking about and why there is so much power, not just in cost savings, but in terms of like, I don't think anyone, I'll say something maybe controversial. I don't think people care about saving money on AI. I think they do, but they don't care about money saving on AI. They want more AI. Yeah. They want to maximize the AI per dollar. It's not like they're going to use less of it. Like they're gonna take that same budget and still want more, but if they can get more tokens and more results and more confidence, and more applications, that's what they want. So that they want the more for consumption, and the cost savings is the thing that allows them to do that, right?
So is it the cost savings, or is it more the ROI on it? Is it, how would you sort of see it that way?
I think it's a combination. I think they're obviously directly linked, right? If an AI conversation pack add-on for your favorite SaaS costs X amount of money, and their hard cost of that is they're operating, if their VCs have them at heel somewhere between 70 and an 85% gross margin. Right? If their AI thing operates at a 25% gross margin because it's all being passed through to OpenAI, like this is problematic for the blended financials of the company as AI becomes a bigger portion of the company. So does that mean that fundamentally we have to change the operating margin profiles that companies operate at? That will have a detrimental effect on the multiples that you get both in the public market and the private market. So the finances run through everything, and the ROI for the customer still needs to be the ROI for the shareholders, right? At the same point, I can't increase my ROI and have my contribution margin get crushed at the same time. So
I think this is it's exciting, isn't it? Because I think from what you're saying, we're going to constantly innovate. There's going to be new releases, new models, and obviously innovation just breeds opportunities, doesn't it? So I don't think there is a more exciting market to be in.
I agree.
Than this one 100%. Now. Whether you're a recruiter recruiting in it, or whether you're a founder building a neo cloud, or an inferencing startup, whatever it might be, there's just so much to do. And it's exciting, and I think it's been really good getting to know you, Seth, and obviously what you're doing. And,
you as well.
And I think for people that are listening, I'm sure you'll welcome anyone to reach out to you directly to learn more about Corvex. I think that's what this is partly here for. But I think keen to see what's going to happen in the next 12 months. It's been so much going on. So you and I need to keep talking.
Absolutely, it's super exciting, and we love hearing about what people are up to, whether you work with Corvex or not. Like Like we talked about, like we're just genuinely interested to hear what people are doing. Maybe you'll learn, maybe we'll learn, maybe we'll work together, maybe you know somebody else. You know, what we really want is we want everyone to feel like they know a guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's it.
Yeah,
that's
you know a guy now. Just call us up. We got you. You know,
and that's it. Reach out to Seth. Reach out to anyone on the team. You know, and I think that's what this is about. But what we'll do is we'll get you on again. You know, it's been an incredible journey over the last sort of year. We'll get you on again in 12 months, and I'm sure it'll look even a little bit more different. But thank you very much for today.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having me, Nick. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I truly hope you got to take away something valuable. This episode was brought to you by Asobi. I'm the founder and managing director, and it's our goal to connect the very best talent in the most exciting scale-ups in AI, ML, and the DC space. If you're looking for more practical advice or just some inspiration from those that have been there and done it, stay with us. We're going to be releasing new episodes every week, so make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow Asobi on LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing.